Thank you. I think it's fair to say that the first night I spent in prison did not go especially well. It certainly didn't go the way I'd planned. I was up there to talk about this program, the Community Working Classics, in which a handful of Grand Valley students were going to develop courses in the humanities, facilitate those courses in the prison. You know, the presumption was that most people in prison had not had access to college-level material before. This was going to be a good thing all the way around. Not so fast, said the inmates. These were people who were used to having their hopes dashed, and they were a little skeptical of my motives. What are you really doing here? Are you studying us as objects? Are you going to write a book about us and make yourself famous? Or have you done something so heinous, so awful at Grand Valley, they've just banished you to go teach at the prison? You know, what are you actually doing here? Rather than answer those questions, I decided to go on the offensive myself and say, well, look, you know, it's not like anybody really wants you to have these courses. It's not like, you know, the world is clamoring for you guys to be educated. A lot of people think this is just a waste of time and energy and money to develop these courses in the first place. So there. It was a very mature sort of start to the program. It really got off to a great start, I thought. But in the midst of this escalation, nonetheless, I was getting them to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about why they would want to be part of this, et cetera. And they came up with 3 really good reasons, I thought. Number one, look, 95% of us are going to get back out into the community probably within 5 years. You can deal with us now and begin to educate us, or you can deal with us when we get to a community near you. Number two, they had a sense that the culture of the prison was so absurd, so through the looking glass, that this program might be a dose of sanity in an otherwise fairly insane situation. And number 3, they had an interesting notion of retributive justice. Yes, we've done wrong, we've harmed other people, but said, we come from broken homes, we come from broken communities, we come from broken schools. Maybe the outside world owes us a little something in terms of filling in some of those gaps. There was a pause at that point. A man, probably in his 30s, who had not said anything to this point, stood up and he said, well, I know why I'm here. He said, somewhere along the way, I lost my humanity. I heard this was a course in the humanities. I am here to get my humanity back. I thought to myself, that's about the most challenging thing I've ever heard in my time teaching. This program we're developing, could it possibly rise to meet that challenge? These courses in art and music and history and literature, could they in fact sustain, promote, and in his case, restore humanity itself? Well, after 12 years of going back and forth between here and Muskegon, I can tell you the answer to that is yes. However, the Department of Corrections will take several years off your life in the process. The Community Working Classics started in 1998. There were a handful of very, very good students here and myself. We worked together to develop the program. We were inspired by a man named Earl Shores, who had written an article in Harper's Magazine. Some of you from liberal studies may have read it, be familiar with it. He said, look, whatever else the poor, the incarcerated, the dispossessed, whatever else they might need, they need what he called the tools of reflection. And by tools of reflection, he meant the liberal arts and especially the humanities, the great books and arts of history, and that those are no less necessary for that population than they are for the rest of the population. And in fact, if you deprive them of access to those tools of reflection, you really deprive them of a full understanding of humanity itself. So we thought, the 6 of us said, well, we kind of think that's what the university is about anyway. So we picked up his idea, we ran with it, though we also played very fast and loose with Shores' rules. He had some of the top professors from the New York City area available to him to develop the courses. We had me and a handful of very bright and ambitious undergraduates. In his course, the teachers teach, the students learn. In our course, look, there's a book, there's an idea, there's a work of art, you put it on the table. These are 2 groups of people who don't know much about one another. We're going to talk about it, we're going to talk about each other, we're going to learn from one another in that process. He stuck very closely to recognizable classics. Sometimes we emphasize that which worked a little bit more than that which was classic. I also wanted to organize all this as a service learning seminar. One of the basic tenets or insights of service learning is that conventional education oftentimes gets the cart before the horse. And by that I mean we tend to want to answer lots of questions that especially college-age people, frankly, have never really asked. We're good at that, but unfortunately, I think it perpetuates a sense of distance that a college education has something less to do with the real world than it might. So I wanted these students and myself, all of us together, said, let's talk about the value of a liberal arts education. What good is Shakespeare? What good is art? What good is philosophy? But let's do it in a context where we're talking with people who are doing natural life, who've been doing hard time their entire lives, and see what kind of responses we get. And sometimes those answers were more than a little jarring, but they were also very compelling. What's supposed to happen, I think what oftentimes does happen, then the students come back to the university with questions that are much more organic about justice, power, race, etc. And the university is well equipped to begin to respond to those kinds of questions. It makes for a more meaningful experience all the way around. What else can I say about the value of this program? I'm going to, I think, allude here to the literary critic Harold Bloom for a couple of points. In the opening pages of his Western canon, he warns people off actually using the classics, the Western canon, to adopt or perpetuate the values of political values or moral or societal values. He said because those authors are most often writing against the prevailing societal norms. They're not advocates for them. And I thought, well, if it's one thing our guys in the prison don't need any help with, it's being more subversive of the prevailing societal norms. That's not their problem. But, on the other hand, what most of them need, and I think we do too, those of us who are involved in the program, is better ways, help with expressing our dissatisfaction with some of those prevailing norms, and the ways in which those norms were more often than not used to, worked against our interest as opposed to upholding them. So we go at this great books approach as a way to a more powerful political critique, a way to learn and to think well about lives in more than just one social context. You know, okay, what does it mean to be a prisoner in 21st century America? What does it mean to be a university student? But also, it's helpful to know what it meant to be a woman in 19th century England, or a modern day African, or to live in ancient Greece. Those useful perspectives. And so we bring those to bear. Bloom's second point was that, you know, ultimately you ought to be careful about this stuff from a political point of view too, because the cultivation of, what you're doing is cultivating your solitude. These things, these writings, reading they certainly can expand your imagination, but it's really about expanding and enriching your inner life. And as he said, bringing one's own mortality into focus. I think that's eloquent, it's good as far as it goes, but we've got some evidence that we can go a little bit beyond that. There's a fellow named Mark Keith, who is one of the natural leaders in our program. Big guy from Grand Rapids, very, very smart, and had become a devotee of Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, throughout the course of the program. A week before he was to be released, a kid came up behind him on the prison yard, hit him with a shank right through his teeth, broke out a molar, you know. Kid runs away. Mark Keith goes back to his cell with one idea in mind. Get a blade, which he got from a friend pretty quickly, go back and find the kid and kill him. All right? That's what's on his mind. He's gushing blood. But he said, as he's recounting this to me, as he's sewing up his own cheek with dental floss, looking in the mirror, he said, Michael, it's like Epictetus was just there in the room. The teachings of Epictetus were there in the room. I started meditating on them even in the midst of all this. He said, and I didn't kill him. And to my mind, 2 lives were not ruined that day, but in fact were saved. And people looking for the practical value of education in the humanities, that seems to me about as good as it might get. And to employ then these tools of reflection, as Shores called them. Mark Keith, by the way, is now out. He's been living in Grand Rapids. He's doing fine. You don't have to employ them completely in one's solitude. You can employ them in terms of one's social reality and others' social reality as well. That may serve in turn to give you a greater place at the table of humanity. And for our guys, at least, the hope is that table will no longer be in the penitentiary. It's been my privilege to meet some extraordinary people along the way in this whole adventure. And they have probably done more for me than I've done for them in terms of sustaining my faith in the humanities and the possibility of humanity. And there is some clips from a video done by J.P. Snydecki, who was a Grand Valley alum. And I'd like to leave this talk by letting you hear the words of some of the people who've been involved in the program. If you turn your attention to the screen.
I come here because it edifies me. I always learn stuff. And when I leave here, this class isn't just here. When I go back, it makes me, I always do things different. I write. I'm not very good, but I'm much better than I was at first. And I read, I'm a non-starter. I can't stop reading now. And I think all the time. And that's something that I I was more impulsive before, and now I just think, you know, and that's better for me in order to just do things, just think about what you're doing.
Everybody's got their own problems or whatever, but nobody knows how to cope with it except for fighting or getting drunk or getting high. If Grand Valley could somehow get everybody into a place, or at least once a day, and gave them classes on relationships and life and stuff like that, I think that it would calm everybody down. If everybody knew why they acted the way they did, why they felt the way they did, it would change them. It really would.
And if more college students went into institutions like Job Corps, Project Rehab, and Muskegon Correctional Facility, that might be changed as well. For me, it came listening to people like Robbie and Mel discuss thinkers like Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
A lot of individuals you brought to the class, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. You see what I'm saying? It's with you, we're not here no more. We're there with them. You see what I'm saying? They taught us a lot. That's why I dug the classes you was teaching. You know, it took us places with a lot of us had never been. It taught us about individuals, taught us about history that we might not have ever learned.
I think that's the only chance I got. You know, I could do anything when I leave here. I could, you know, as far as I could have anything or whatever, but if I still think the same, then the results will always be the same. I might not ever get caught if I was to go out here and break the law again, but the mindset would still be the same, so I would still be the same. I would still be in prison.
This program, I think, does a good job at doing a service aspect in terms of getting us out and trying to help people and kind of reify their existence as humans. Like when they make on evaluations, say stuff, well, this is just at least 2 hours a week where I feel like I'm worth something. I can actually, people respect my opinions. Yeah. I'm listened to. 2 hours a week. How many hours a week do we get in class, from our parents, from our friends? I mean, we get that all the time. They just get it 2 hours a week.
You know, every day I wake up and I see these officers around here in these black and gray suits. That they don't think very much of me. You know what I'm saying? And that does a little bit to my self-esteem. And when a person like you, a professor at a university, comes up here and say, "Hey, Felder, how you doing? How are things going today? I like the way you wrote this," or, you know, you give me, you know, something from you, and I'm able to give something back. You know what I'm saying? It makes me feel good, and that's how I benefit. People like JP and Nate and Kareth and, you know, things like that. When they come in and they express their views and I'm able to express my views back to them, it makes me feel human.
I read part of the letter from Mel, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he ended up back there for he's going to be back in, you know, another 8 months.
Yeah.
We thought he was our prize student, right?
Yeah.
He's going to end up off probation, went back in. You know, and he's this whole letter said, "Man, you know, this is on me. This is nobody's fault but mine." Yeah. If we did nothing else but that, help people say, you know, look, we take responsibility for our shit. You take responsibility, you know, for yours.
You know, with the program,
and for us.
Here's what Mel writes in his last letter. JP, we must touch the heart of the world and show that great people are everywhere. We only need to cultivate and aid. Take you and me, for example. 2 people from different places. But I know, and I'm sure you'll agree, that our souls are from and in the same place. And that's what beautiful hearts show the world, that no matter what, we must seek to find the sameness in each other, forever to understand each other.